Hello, yay, we're on.
Woohoo!
On there. Let's see who's here. All right, yeah. I think there's something we have to do to open this up. Perhaps, I'm not sure. This has been like this before. And hi, everyone. I hope you're here. Yes, there they are.
Yep, here they are. They're showing up. Yay!
Yay! It's so cool when you start these webinars. It's like 0 people, and then all of a sudden, everyone. Then all the numbers kind of show up, and so it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to see those numbers. Jump! Welcome. So you wanna go first there?
Yeah, sure. I'll get us rocking and rolling. So we're so excited that you all are here for our anxiety busting webinar. Look, Jody, you have to show them your t-shirt first before we go. Trust me. I hope. Hi Nanette. Hi Danielle. I hope you all got a kick out of that photo of Jody and me as superheroes. I thought it was hilarious. For those of you who might be new to me, I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Corinne Zupko. I am a video blogger. I am the author of a forthcoming book called From Anxiety to Love. Jody and I are like soul sisters with busting through these anxiety blocks, and we have a lot in common, including that we both have chickens, right, Jody? So yeah, I am a counselor by training. I'm a coach. Because of my dedication to healing my own mind and overcoming the anxiety issues that I've had, I can't help but share what I've learned. It's literally bursting out of me. And so I'm just really excited to be here to bust through some blocks and kick some anxieties out the door with Jody.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Jody Aman, and I'm a counselor also by trade. I'm a coach. I'm a video blogger, and I help people, kind of know how to create happiness in their life, how to let go of their pain and their problems, especially anxiety. I talk about it a lot because it's a problem that I've had in my life. I know we're going to talk about that a lot tonight. I'm so excited to share my story, and because I think it really helps people and gives hope, because a lot of people struggle. And when you're in it, when you're in that anxiety and you think it might last forever, it's so scary. So I'm just like Corinne, like I want to share because I want to give people that hope and teach them how to let go of it, how to get control over their life, get their power back, and master happiness in their life. So happy to have you here.
Awesome. I'm so excited for everybody who's here. Hello, everyone. Feel free to say hi in the chat when you get here. We'd love to know who you are and where you're from. And Jody and I are very conversational, so please, if you have any questions or comments as we go, we'll be periodically keeping an eye on the chat so we can answer questions.
Yeah, and Danielle's our woman behind the scenes. And so she'll help us out. You see her name, Danielle, there, and she said hi, ladies, in the beginning. So she'll catch anything that we don't catch if we're chatting away. Michigan, hi, Katie.
Hi, Katie. Hi, Fiona. Welcome. Awesome. So I guess shall I get us started with beginning with. All right, so we're going to dive in. I'm going to share my anxiety story, and I always like to say too that this is largely something that I've let go of, but like you said, Jody, it's really helpful, I think, for other people to know and to hear because it's so relatable. When I'll share more about my reaction to learning about your story, but there's a lot of commonalities because anxiety does a lot of the same things in a lot of different people. So I was pretty much, I don't want to say born with anxiety, but I started struggling with it at a really young age. I was probably around 1.5 to 2 years old. My mom disappeared suddenly from my life for a week. She had to go into the hospital. And when she came back, she had a kid who had horrible separation anxiety. My poor mom could not walk out of a room without me screaming my head off. So that lasted for quite some time. And I remember in childhood, being afraid of all sorts of bizarre things. Like I couldn't be left alone with my grandfather because I was afraid he'd die in front of me. I developed some strange phobias of different things. I remember I had like a phobia of like flushing the toilet because I was afraid it would overflow. Like it was like this, it's like such a sad little fear, you know, like when you think about this little kid having this fear. But things came to a head for me when I was in college. I was a sophomore. It was my sophomore year. And a student who I did not know, I learned that he was at a party the night before and was dead the next morning because he died very suddenly of meningitis. I remember feeling just a spike, this shoot of fear come kind of through my body and this tingling through my arms. And I remember that day just talking myself through it, like, okay, you know, this is his experience. This doesn't mean this is going to happen to you. And I calm myself down. But I went to sleep that night, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, I shared a room with a roommate at the time. She was in the bunk bed below me. I remember waking up at 3 a.m. in the midst of my very first panic attack. And for those of you who have had panic attacks, who have had significant anxiety, you know what it's like. It's just that overwhelming feeling of dread. It's that overwhelming feeling that like you're gonna die, that, you know, you're next. And I remember just shaking unsteadily down climbing down the bunk bed ladder, pulling our phone into our suite's bathroom because we didn't have cell phones then. Or some people did, but I didn't. And calling my mom at 3 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't even cry because the fear and the panic was so bad that the tears would just make it even harder to breathe. So it was my first panic attack, and it wasn't my last. The anxiety persisted for quite some time, and well, for years actually, but the panic attack, that first initial panic attack, felt like it lasted for a few months. I remember we were traveling. My sister was living abroad, and I went to go see her, but it was extremely difficult. And this is anxiety where I couldn't eat. It was hard for me to function. I couldn't get up easily. It was just, everything was really, really challenging and very, very difficult. I didn't want to lose weight necessarily, but it was just, I was losing weight because it was so hard for me to eat. And I got into therapy. I had such a great connection and got so much help from my counselor. That's ultimately why I ended up going down the career path of counseling. But the interesting thing was that counselor, every time I brought up that I felt like my fear was linked to a fear of death, because it was really this like existential, like, why the heck are we here? Like, what in the world, what is this all about if we can be alive and then dead? Like, am I next? What is this? Am I going to lose somebody? You know, all those thoughts. And every time I brought up in therapy that I felt like my anxiety was linked to this existential search for meaning, why are we here? What is this? Really wanting to dive into spirituality, my counselor would actually change the topic. And I knew that counselor perhaps either wasn't comfortable with where I was wanting to go, or maybe hadn't done this type of work for him or herself. And so I knew at that point in time that our work was done and it was time for me to move on and continue to explore other things, because I was willing more than anything to find my way through this. Like, take the bull by the horns and like, let's go at this. I'm determined to find my way back to peace. So from there, my mom gave me A Course in Miracles, which for those of you who, you know, are a little familiar or maybe somewhat familiar with my work, that's a huge piece of what I teach, because it's been so helpful to me in undoing my issues with anxiety. And it was because of the course that I really started finding my way back to peace. But I was able to go deeper with it than I realized at the time. So I was working course principles, but almost using the book kind of like a Band-Aid, in that I would use it. I wouldn't feel good. I'd feel anxious. I'd grab the book. I'd read something that made me feel better. And then I'd put it down to go about my day, to keep doing what I was doing. And therefore, fear was still there. I like thinking of fear as like a leaky pipe. You know, if you plug a hole in one place, it's going to spring a leak in another place until you start getting to the core of, you know, the root of your anxiety, whatever that may be. And so I was working the course principles and feeling better and developing a lot of trust in my inner teacher, this idea of your higher mind, a part of yourself that you can tap into for guidance, for peace, for anything. And the interesting thing, though, was that things came to a head for me again in 2009, when I call it my adult age, anxiety episode, where circumstances were such that I was in a lot of stress, and I started feeling this kind of like building unrest again. And things again came to a head for me, and I found myself yet again back in the thick of panic and anxiety, which felt even worse to me from what I could remember of my experience, like 11, 12 years prior to that. And I can share more a little bit about turning the corner with anxiety, but that episode, I was so determined again to go deeper and to find my way through this, that it just, in a sense, made me more determined and more motivated to come through it. So that's it, sort of in a nutshell. The fears, I'll just say, in terms of that idea of fear being like a leaky pipe, the panic attacks got better for that time period between 2009 and when I was in college. The panic attacks slowly subsided. I started just finding a lot of peace, but I'd still be afraid. I couldn't go near a hospital without feeling like I was going to pass out. I couldn't get on a plane. I couldn't get, it was really hard for me to take pills, to get like an injection of some sort, or even get blood drawn. Like I'd have that, near pass out response. So that's what I mean when fear is like a leaky pipe, where there were still pieces, there were still elements of anxiety, because I could still go deeper with undoing it. I had done a lot of work, but I could still go deeper. So that's it in a nutshell. Jody, I would love to hear your story.
Yeah. Well, first let me respond to yours, because it's interesting how, you hear those themes of anxiety so paralyzing in a lot of ways and immobilizing, it just wanted to keep you stuck. And then also it's motivating in a way, like that desperation that we feel when we're anxious, this intense desperation, either it could overwhelm us, but it also could motivate us to be like, I gotta fix this because I can't live like this anymore. Like, this is not a life. And I could relate to that so well, because that's how I felt when my anxiety was so bad. I just felt like this is not a life. And if I have to, hi everyone, I'm seeing everyone's hellos, they're so awesome. If I have to live like and feel this panic, and I know I've been in panic for days like that too. And I know a lot of you probably have, because I've talked to so many thousands of people of anxiety at this point. And many people have a panic attack. And, they say, if you read on the internet, it's like the panic attack's supposed to last 10 minutes. Well, mine lasted hours, sometimes days. Maybe I'd be able to fall asleep a little bit to get a break. But so much like Corinne, my anxiety started when I was really young, when I was 5, and I first learned that death existed in the world. Like when you're young, you don't even know what death is and that it happens. And when I learned about it, and it was this funny way, it was like President's Weekend in February, and I was, 1977, because I was 5, and we were learning about Presidents Lincoln and Washington at our little, father-daughter program. And on the way home, I said, well, Dad, where's President Washington and President Lincoln now? And he just was like, I didn't know what to say. Like this cute little rosy cheek 5-year-old was like so happy. And he was obviously afraid of the concept of death too, because it just came out. And when he said, they're dead, and I knew that death was bad just from his energy around him. And maybe I asked what it was. And when he explained it, like, you die and that's it, that was like, it's kind of like that story of Buddha, like when Buddha goes out and sees someone suffering for the first time, and he's like, that's how it was for me, because it was like, oh my gosh, there's bad in the world. And I'm so grateful that I, before age 5, like I didn't experienced significant hardship, that this was a shock to me though. And it took me months to recover, to like you, be alone. My mom had to read to me constantly, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it was anxiety. I didn't call it that. I felt sick. And so I just felt sick, but I was terrified, and I was scared of death. I was scared of people dying. So it's interesting. I mean, I talk to a lot of people with anxiety, and everyone's kind of conceptually afraid of death, biologically, obviously, that comes up, but people don't really say that anymore. I don't know why. They have really specific fears about things. And I'd love to hear, as we're talking a little bit more, if you write, what is some of the fears that our audience is having? That would be interesting to know. But anxiety came and went in my life, kind of like Corinne's did. And I tell these stories a lot. So when I first got married, it was pretty intense because it was a pretty stressful time for us. And so my anxiety is really intense, and I barely could get out of bed. And I missed some work a little bit. I went to work, I came home and got right in bed at 5 o'clock. Like, I just couldn't face life at all. But it felt so horrible. I was just like you. I was like, I have to figure this out, because there's no way. Like, I can't go on. Like, I didn't have a future. Anxiety steals your future, basically, because it tells you, that you'll be anxious there. Do you know that? You'll be anxious there. Do you know that? And just like anything that you could see in your future, you would picture yourself anxious there. And it's like, that's not what I want. That I can't even imagine. It's so awful. And so it's like, so I was like, I got to do something about this. My husband's suffering, I'm just starting our life together. I got to do something about this. And so I read everything I could. I know we're going to talk about that soon. We want to talk about our turning the corner, because this is why we're here. We want to talk about busting out. And, but I wanted people to know my story, so they know we understand. And obviously listening to you, I'm like, oh, she gets this. She totally gets this. And I think a lot of times, my viewers of my videos and people read my blogs and stuff, they're so relieved that somebody gets it, because anxiety is so isolating. People feel so alone and so different than everyone else, because it's invisible. And we look out there and everyone else looks great. Everyone else looks confident. And, as a counselor, Corinne, you must know this too, that, no one's okay. Everybody's struggling. Everyone's insecure about stuff. Everyone's, dealing with low self-esteem issues. We've all been raised in this Western culture. So we all have these, high expectations of ourselves and feelings of inadequacy. We all do. And so, but it looks like everybody's fine but us. And we're the secret keepers as counselors, and we hear that not everyone's fine. Mm-hmm. And they're not and we're not talking about mentally ill people. We're talking about the worried well. We're talking about people who look fine. They are not. Everybody is struggling. And so I've, kind of decided I want to dedicate my life to making a difference, to have people not feel so alone, so afraid, and so overwhelmed all the time, because that is no life. And, we could do some really, really amazing things and have some really amazing life. And I'd rather people have that. I have that. I created that for myself. But,
wow.
So yeah.
If I can just share a couple of thoughts that come to mind about what you've said. That
Katie, though, some people, Katie was just talking. Thanks, Katie, for telling us about your postpartum depression. I really appreciate that. Fear of being alone. I get it. I've talked to a lot of people who feel that way. Yeah, go ahead. I'm interested to know what you think.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie, for sharing. And hi, everybody. Hi, Fred from Trinidad, West Indies. And I saw somebody, hi, Stephen and Marta from Poland. That's awesome that you're all here. Thank you. And again, please feel free to share in the chat whatever you feel moved to. I just wanted to respond that what you were saying about, here's somebody who gets it, like when you're listening to my story and I'm listening to yours. I just want to emphasize too, here's somebody who's getting it and talking about it. I think the problem is that there's still such a stigma surrounding having anything emotionally, not okay inside, that Katie for sharing in the chat. Thank you for those. I see people sharing on Instagram. I feel like a lot of people are becoming less afraid to speak about it, which is really, really nice to hear, because this, I think most people have anxiety. And so talking about it, even in just my experience in the past few years with sharing and doing the work that I've been doing, friends from high school, friends from college, people, relatives, people that never talked about it before will say, guess what? Me too. I really, really relate to that. And to speak to what you said also about how, folks look okay on the outside. Nobody knew. I lived with 5 roommates in a suite that year. One roommate in our room, and then we shared 2 other rooms in our suite. Nobody knew, because see this smile? Mm-hmm. It covers things up really nicely. And so on the surface, on the outside, when you're glancing around and it looks like everybody else is great, or if you're looking at photos that people are sharing on Facebook and it's like, oh my gosh, it looks like those folks have the best life. They're so happy. We have no idea, because you're just seeing a picture. So I just really wanted to highlight that, because I think it's so important to acknowledge that, like you said, as counselors, we're hearing what's really going on, but you don't see that.
Absolutely. When people used to think people used to always think that my life was so great, even when I was young, like they thought I had the perfect family. And that made me feel so invisible. I mean, I was a real victim of that, because I felt so invisible, because no one saw, any struggles that I had or any of the pain that I was in. And, I felt invalidated. Of course, that was, my mind was like deep in that victimhood. So that was part of the problem. But so I really understand that. I have tons of compassion for people who feel invisible because people don't know what they're going through. And so I love that people are stepping out and talking about it a little bit more. And, now that I talk about anxiety in my own story, people are coming out of the woodwork, just like you, and sharing their stories with me. But I'm not even surprised anymore at all. Like, I just not surprised at all. It's like, it's so common. I mean, they say like 1 in 4 people have anxiety. I think it's much more than that. We just call it all kinds of different things. It's just got a lot of names, this thing, doesn't it?
I agree.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what we call it, it kind of acts on us in the same sort of way, even though the objects of our fear are all different things. Like Stephen here says, he's afraid of what others might think. I mean, we have all these specific fears. And what's so interesting about anxiety is we don't even understand someone else's fears. So when I was deep in my anxiety and I'd panic a lot, I did read a lot of fiction to try to take my mind off it. That was one of my tactics that I used. And I remember reading this novel, nondescript novel, but the woman in the novel was afraid of horses because she had fallen off a horse when she was young or something. And she was trying to go near horses and she was having a panic attack. And I remember thinking, I wish I had that one. I wish I had that anxiety, because that sounds so easy to me. To be afraid of horses, but of course it wasn't easy to her. And my anxiety might have sounded really easy to her. That would have been handleable. Or some people might say, "Oh, Steve, when we're young, we're afraid of what other people think, and sometimes we grow out of that, and sometimes we don't. Mostly, we're all still, really conscious about what others think, because it's ingrained. I mean, that's a cultural issue. This is, we grow up thinking everyone's looking at us and that we're in a fishbowl. And so that's where these high expectations come from, that, we think that there's these standards and we have to meet them or we failed. And so we have these high expectations of ourselves, and we don't even know what the expectations are. We have to be pretty and young and beautiful and fat and the best mom ever and the best friend ever and creative and everything. Like, we have to be the best of everything and perfect. And we can't meet those, or ridiculous. And so when we fail, then we begin to not trust ourselves. And that's where anxiety really picks up and gets out of control and just really takes over. And so that fear of what others think, like that anxiety needs you to think that, because it needs you to not trust yourself.
It needs fuel.
Adequate. It needs fuel.
And that's the fuel.
That's like the food. It's like the food. So, We have to be kryptonite.
Right.
Like that. Going with the superhero metaphor.
So how about then, shall we go in the direction now of just turning the bend and rounding the corner and recovery talk and letting folks know that there's more than hope. I feel like, again, just in my own experience, like this, I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish at all, but I feel like that if there are perspective shifts, rather than looking at this as a burden, what can I learn from this? If there's different ways that we can think about it that I very much believe can take us out of it. And so for me, where I turned the corner was, and again, this goes deep because my anxiety was very, very existential. It was very much linked to fears of death, fears of sickness, those types of things. To me, it was about starting to learn that I have a part of myself that is quiet and still, that can easily get drowned out by the chatterbox fear thoughts on the surface. But that when I can connect with that deeper self, the true me, that I like thinking of it as like my capital S self, and the lowercase s self is like what A Course in Miracles would call the ego, the fear thoughts, the fear voice. When I started learning how to connect with that deeper sense of self within me and really being open to letting go of that more fearful, limited sense of self, opening up to something, much bigger that I was, that was a huge, huge shift for me. And that shift really started happening after that adult age episode of anxiety that I mentioned in 2009, because my determination and my willingness was so great to not stop until I found relief. So I stopped running from it. That was a huge thing. It was that rather than trying to just make it go away and wishing it away, it was like, all right, I'm now, if there's this thing over here making all this noise and creating all this problem, rather than trying to keep doing this and pushing it away, which only makes it, want to come back more, I was now like, okay, I'm gonna turn toward this thing. I'm gonna turn toward these feelings, and I'm going to try to see them differently. I'm going to look at them with that greater sense of self, with that love within me. I'm going to look at that with that. And A Course in Miracles teaches that miracles are shifts in perceptions. They're shifts in perception from fear to love. And so in having willingness to see this anxiety, these issues differently, what was coming forward instead was a new way of seeing it, that it wasn't my actual voice. It was just a lie. It was untruth. And the trust that was simultaneously building in this greater sense of self with this capital S, that trust, I feel like when that trust is there, it comes automatically with peace and with joy. And so it's like the anxiety has nothing to hold on to, because I'm not fueling the fire anymore. Just like to go back to that example, I'm not feeding it by even ignoring it, by trying to push it away. Now I'm like, all right, I'm gonna look at this with this inner teacher, with this inner guide, this capital S self, because I'm willing to see it differently. I'm willing to let a shift come to me. And that's very much the process that I used to start to really be unearthing the roots that anxiety seemed to have, to get in touch instead with my true self, which is, I very much believe that our true essence, all of us, is love and peace and joy. And if there's anything other than that that's showing up, it's again an opportunity to see it differently, and to again return to what we think we may have forgotten, which is that love and joy, but that it's always there. It's always there, even if it feels like it's buried. And that was always very reassuring to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I felt it. I can't believe it. The more we talk, the more I hear our similarities in our stories. But yeah, and it just feel like, that light and that love is already there in all of us. Like that self-love is even there. Like that is who we really are. And this is just kind of clouding our vision. That's all anxiety is. It's a very powerful though, in its own way. But we have to figure out how we contribute to giving it power. And that's, I think, how I turned, I mean, how my corner turned. And I remember waiting for my corner. I'm like, when is I going to turn the corner? Like, I was working so hard, and, I was doing mindfulness, and I was, really trying to keep myself healthy and doing all the right stuff. And my anxiety did get better, but I still had that, like you were saying, that like underlining like fear of death, and this like wondering like, yeah, why are we here, and why is there suffering, and those kind of big spiritual questions too I was asking. But this is what turned the corner for me is one time, this is a very spiritual story too. And you don't have to be spiritual to get rid of your anxiety. It is our, your and I story, but but I'll tell you how this connects is because, my husband said, Jody, why don't you ask Jesus to help you? And I thought, well, that's funny. Like, I'm not in trouble, like I'm not suffering. Well, I mean, I was totally suffering. It's so ridiculous now to say that, but I was totally suffering. But in my eyes, I mean, I was a social worker. And so people in extreme poverty, people who are being abused, people in war-torn countries, like those were the suffering people in the world. And, everybody else like really didn't deserve any help because they were okay. And so that's how I saw myself. Like I was, I was middle class and I was white and there's no war here. And so I felt like I really didn't deserve any help from Jesus. But what I realized when I was reflecting on that is what I was really saying was that I had no worth. It's so strange. Like I didn't even know that I had a low worth problem. Now I'm like, I mean, it's ridiculous. I had such a horrible low worth problem, like my whole life, but until this point, but you don't even know it. Like you can't even see it because it's like hiding behind all this other stuff, really hiding behind my anxiety. And, and I had low self-esteem, and I worried what other people thought of me, and I had all this, and I was, worried about my body and everything. But I didn't realize that, I didn't think I deserved to feel better. And that was a big aha moment for me, that I deserved to feel better just because, nobody deserves to suffer. And so it doesn't matter what circumstances cause your suffering. Like we have pain in our life, but there's that fear and the angst that causes the suffering. And so anyone who's suffering could ask for help, and no one deserves that suffering, and no one has to stay in that. We could figure out how to get ourselves out of it, or how to experience pain. We're going to experience pain in this earthly life. How do we do that and not suffer? And so that's what I was interested in. So that was one thing for me, is that accept that I deserve to feel better and really deal with my self-worth and learn about why that culture, the way I brought up in the culture and all these expectations that I had, caused me not to trust myself because I couldn't meet those high expectations. And if I couldn't meet those high expectations, I was inadequate. And if I'm inadequate, how am I going to deal with life if I'm anxious? Or how am I going to go through hard times? So what happens if somebody dies? How could I manage that? Because I'm totally inadequate to even be a good person, be a smart person, or whatever my expectation was. So when we have these high expectations, we don't meet them, we feel inadequate, then we think we're not going to be able to handle anything hard in our life because we're inadequate. And that's why anxiety is so powerful. So that was a big lesson for me. And, it's so invisible. But the second thing that was really important to me is to understand that, I was learning all these skills and trying to put all these skills together, and that helped a little bit. But I had to break down the power of anxiety, and just like you, like just facing it, like just, that totally undermines the power of the anxiety by looking at it and be like, what are you saying? Like, what are you trying to tell me? Wait a minute. And, and see how ridiculous it really sounds because anxiety sounds like us. We think it's us, we think it's our higher wisdom voice or something. We think it's a truth, what it's saying to us, like you can't, or that's going to be awful, or it's going to be really hard. I mean, anxiety is saying all those things, but it's not true. And so to break down the power of anxiety is so important, and I think we all miss it. And for me, that just changed everything. Like, okay, expose anxiety, find out what it does, how it gets power of you, how it lies to you, how it gets you to believe it. And kind of this externalizing it, like it takes the anxiety outside of you, and you don't feel like such a failure anymore, so weak for having anxiety, and it really helped me out. And there's a third turning the corner, and all of these kind of had to come together for me. And the third thing was that I had to connect with my agency, and I call it personal agency, that core, that inner, that large S self is like that, my skills and abilities, what I value in the world, what's really important to me, like that love or that connection, that is my personal agency that I have control over. That big S self, that little S self, that voice of fear could talk and talk and talk, but I have control. So in that fear voice is always saying, it's out of your control. You can't handle, how are you going to get a hold of this? Because it's out of your control. And my big ass self is like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that all these things could happen to me, because what is most important in my life, this is what I learned, what's most important in my life is how I responded to it. So things could happen, horrible, horrible, awful things. And I've walked a lot of people through recovery from horrible abuse, war situations, the worst possible experiences you could imagine, and they still respond. They still respond, and their response, like, so how they think about it, how they act, how they keep relationships going, all those things says more about them, and also makes or breaks their life. So if they're bitter, they're not as happy, or if they're forgiving, or they let go, or they see the good in things, or they act by connecting with others and giving to others and getting that back. I mean, their recovery is going to be totally different. And so that's what's so much more important. So interesting, because I used to feel so vulnerable in my anxiety, but then I learned that I'm invulnerable. I mean, the course taught me that too, because I was a student of the course also. So I learned that I'm invulnerable because I am this light and love, and it always was here and always will be here, and it's completely connected to everything. And so I'm invulnerable, and really I have 100% of control over the only thing that matters. The only thing that matters to make or break happiness in my life, I have 100% of control over. That totally changes the game, because anxiety needs you to feel out of control for it to have power, right? And so that's how I turned the corner. I just turned, and I was like, it was so awesome.
You're hitting on so many important points, and I'm actually just my eyes are drawn over to the chat. I see we have Course folks with us, because people are sharing just a little bit about how Course Miracles has helped them. Deidre, hi. The anxiety is not that. It's a beautiful insight, realizing that the anxiety is not me. It's not me.
Yes.
It's not who I am. It's just, again, a fearful voice that's trying to get me to listen to it. And it was Margarita who said, fear gives it power.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
spot on.
Yeah.
And Katie, my guidance system, when I feel upset or tense, I know I'm identifying with the ego, the false self. And that's beautiful, because that to me that's always the barometer. For me, the more anxiety I felt, the more that told me that I was listening to the voice of the ego. The more peace I felt, the more that told me I was tuned in to the voice of the capital S self, the true me, the higher mind, higher self, whatever you want to call it. So it was a great little thing to think about as anxiety being a barometer, telling me which voice I'm listening to, because then it puts me back in control. Just like you said, Jody, it gives me that sense of agency, my power to choose. then if I know what voice I'm listening to, I now have the power to choose to listen to that voice of love within me instead. And what you said about the Course teaching you that you're invulnerable, I so am spot on with that, because that's why, that invulnerability, that love has been there before my life seemingly began, dropping into this trust that it's going to be there before this life is, seemingly over. That's been huge for me in overcoming, the existential, the death fears, all of those deep rooted fears. So it's big stuff.
Yeah. And, I mean, to get really spiritual here, like I was afraid of flying too, really afraid of flying. I did cure myself of fear of flying. I fly all over the place now, but I was like, I'm in this plane, I'm in God's hands. And if the plane crashes, I'm still in God's hands. Like, that doesn't change. So that really helped me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's like, no matter what happens, like that core as self, I mean, that self is still in God's hands. You're still connected.
And I can just attest, I'm delighted to hear that you overcame flying anxiety. This is just something that I spoke about in a conference that I was just at. I had to fly out to Las Vegas for this conference, and I used to not be able to get on a plane. And this time it was not a bumpy ride. I'm sorry, it was not a smooth ride, especially coming home. And I can honestly say I had not one spike of fear or anxiety the entire time. It was new because previous flights, I would at least maybe have a little bit of, I kind of don't like this. This time there was nothing. And that's awesome. A miracle. That's a huge shift. And that to me told me that, like, I'm not stopping. I'm not stopping till every fear block in my mind is done, because the peace feels so damn good.
Yeah. Oh, that is true. It does feel good. And I know people who have had a lot of anxiety, and then even in a moment, like if we do a meditation together or something, they have peace. It feels so good. And most people who've had anxiety have had a little bit of peace or calm time, and that they're craving that and want that. And so I'm so excited, to tell them that it is possible. Because I think a lot of the messages out there that it's not possible, that it's something you have to live with or you have to have it forever. And I mean, I know a lot of people who've had anxiety and do not have it anymore. A lot of people. And so if all those people could do it, and some of them have had horrible, horrible experiences in their life. So it's not like, oh, well, I'm different. Well, you think you're different. That's a voice of the fear saying that, because it wants you to stay there, because it wants to stay in your life. It's having a lot of fun, giving you a lot of trouble and making you suffer. And it wants to stay there. So it's going to say, I'm different because I've tried everything and it doesn't work. Well, you haven't got my book, maybe.
Woo!
And you haven't got my book, maybe. And that's why.
I was just going to ask you if you would be willing to share some of the specific skills, some of the ideas out of this. I just want to first start off by saying that this book, it's beautiful. It really breaks down. You did such a nice job of breaking down the false things that anxiety says, and then giving skills to work through that. And I feel like this is like a therapist in like a pocket, like this can help. It's going to help so many people, Jody. And I'm just really, really excited that you went on the journey of writing it, because I can recognize that it's not easy. Book writing's not an easy thing to do, and you just gave the world a huge gift.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, this is my baby here. Yeah, You Want Anxiety Zero. It's just a fun title because I have a sense of humor, and I really wanted to express like it is curable. I mean, I just wanted it to be like it doesn't. A lot of people gave me feedback about this title, and they were like, well, maybe you should do it like You 37 Anxiety 12, because sometimes, you still struggle. And I'm like, nope, like that's not real, that we can, and it takes practice. And it takes practice. And it didn't take me a day. I didn't say, oh, this anxiety is stupid, I don't need to listen to it anymore. I had to practice that. I had to practice that over and over, and, to keep reminding myself and remembering. And I give people all the tools they need to practice. So this is what's so awesome about this book, is because you don't have to, like a lot of gurus are like, let it go. And they're like, don't pay attention and all that kind of stuff. But think about gratitude, and that's all beautiful. But how? We need to like have these steps to kind of help us know how to do it. And so that's what I do. I break down anxiety. I expose all of its tricks. I expose like 15 tricks and tactics of anxiety. Like, I'll read some to you because it's really fun. Anxiety says, I protect you. BS. It doesn't protect you. It makes you suffer. But man, it's so convincing. It seems so logical. And it seems the total truth that anxiety is protecting you from suffering. And, we'll stay in suffering a really long time to protect ourselves from suffering. It's so ridiculous, but we all do it. Anxiety uses black and white thinking. It says this is real. It convinces you that you're crazy. Do you ever feel totally like you're psychotic during a panic attack? You feel like you're losing your mind, but you're not. It's just a panic attack. But if you think you're losing your mind, wow, that's much more scary, isn't it? That's what it does. So I go through all 15 of these, and then I have 15 skills and knowledges that, thousands of interviews that I've had with people and their anxiety. And these are 15 skills that seem to be common. And if you read the book, you'd probably recognize a lot of, thanks Danielle for putting that up. You'll probably recognize that you do a lot of these things. See, when I've interviewed people forever, I noticed that people don't need to learn skills. They have mad skills. People have so many skills that they're surviving these difficult times. I mean, Corinne, as a counselor, you see people survive and have resilience for some really awful things, but they don't even notice that. They don't even notice the amazing skills that they have, because anxiety is so powerful and it has so much control. So if we break down anxiety, those skills just come out. And so instead of teaching these skills, I'm just validating these skills that people already have. Or maybe you get an idea that you don't know about, but mostly it's just like, wait a minute, I do this, I could do this. And then you're getting in touch with that agency that you have, or that self, that loving, and that person who, when we do stuff, when we use our skills to make ourselves feel better, we do it with a conscious purpose. There's something that's important to us that has us acting those ways. So any action that we take, and curing anxiety is all about taking action. And it could be thinking though, and it doesn't have to be like a literal action, but taking action is always done with a conscious purpose. There's always something important to us behind it. And that's how we connect with that love and that connected self, that light self that we are. So, and then the end of the book, I just wanted to add this too, because I do love this part, is the end of the book, I talk about self-forgiveness. And people might think that's strange to have self-forgiveness in an anxiety book. But like I was saying before, the reason why we're so vulnerable to anxiety is that we don't trust ourselves. Trust me on the fact that anxiety is a trust issue. Anxiety issues are trust issues. And so we need to forgive ourselves for anything we're holding against ourselves, any of those inadequacies or anything we think about ourselves, any of the blame that we're putting on ourselves for anything. And we need to let it go, but we don't know how to let that go. And people are like, yeah, okay, I love to forgive myself. How? I break it down. It's so practical. I love being this practical about this, because nobody's talking and teaching about how to let go of things. So I'm so excited about this book, actually.
I'm so excited about it too. And I just want to say too that, because like I said, I'm a counselor by training and I teach counseling classes now. I feel like this book is also awesome for therapists who are working with clients with anxiety, because you can use these ideas and these, you have some writing exercises in here, some things to list. It's just chock full of fabulous ideas and tools through through anxiety, overcoming it.
Yes.
And I love
You
the title.
win.
I love the title. You won Anxiety Zero. It gets nothing.
It gets nothing.
It gets nothing. No
It gets
satisfaction.
nothing.
No
I'm
nothing.
glad you like it. Yeah. Yeah. It did seem like a very spiritual title because it was like competitive, like metaphor, but it works, I think, in a way. Like in a way, it is really spiritual to me.
And I also want to emphasize too, just even with this idea, you know, with our initial picture of being superheroes and, you know, battling anxiety and overcoming it, it's, to me, you know, the battle comes when again, there's that avoidance, which adds fuel to it. We can also approach this with a sense of ease, with a sense of, you know, willingness and determination to find our way through, but it doesn't have to be a fight. Like, it doesn't have to be a big struggle. It can be a process, and it can be gentle if we allow ourselves that process. If we can accept that this is where I'm at right now, you know, I still perhaps have work to do, but I can be okay with myself as I am. That creates a sense of ease. That creates a sense of gentleness, rather than thinking, I should be over this by now. Nobody else suffers from this. You know, I should be here. I should be doing that. That creates the strain, and that creates the battle. Whereas if we can just accept that wherever we are in the journey is where we are, and that it's okay, it really makes it much
I think
kinder.
that's so important. That's that self-compassion piece.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing we're not taught. Like, we should be taught this in middle school. Like, how do they have compassion for ourselves? How do I be gentle with ourselves at every part of the process? You know, instead of judging ourselves so harshly. I mean, that's what really, you know, that's what causes all our suffering. And so I definitely go into that because I think it's so connected with our anxiety and fear, not allowing ourselves to be who we are. You know, we're just judging everything constantly because it's wrong. And why am I feeling this way? And why, you know, my mom had a friend who passed away last week, and it was a horrible tragedy. And it was like this weekend, she said, I just can't get over this. I'm like, Mom, it's 5 days. I mean, we don't give ourselves a break at all, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Just, anyway, it's wow. I love that we just are so connected about this, and we just get it. And it looks like a lot of people really could relate to what we're saying. It sounds like Deirdre and Katie has a copy of the book. Yay!
And Michelle's going to get the book for her clients. Awesome.
Oh,
Michelle.
good. Yeah. Okay. So all of my panic attacks were the scariest time of my life. I think you said that, Corinne, tonight, and I was like, yeah. You were like, it was like even worse than before, because like every time anxiety comes, it feels like it's worse. I think that's one of my tricks, actually. Not my tricks, anxiety tricks, but you know, it feels like it's worse every single time because it's happening right now, and it's so intense. So and you know, and that desperation that you have to like anything to get rid of it. Yeah. But so thanks, Danielle, put that link up there. So that's the Amazon link that you could get it on an e-version, like an ebook on Kindle or Nook. It is on Barnes & Noble too. And if you want to wait, I do have an audio version coming out, but it just is a longer process. So it's, I think someone wrote that on my blog today, like, I can't wait to the audio version because they want to hear it. And I love listening to books on, audio books that are read by the author, because I think there's a lot in there. So I had a lot of fun making it. It's being edited now, but.
That's awesome. Woo! That's awesome. Woohoo! That's awesome. Wow.
So Danielle, could you tell everyone where to find Corinne too, and my website, Corinne's website?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that'd be awesome. And if anybody has any final questions, we have about 8 minutes left. Feel free to pop your questions into the chat.
Ask us questions. That would be lovely.
Oh.
Do you have any daily practices that you do, Corinne?
Daily practices?
Yeah. What do you do?
I surely do. One of the things that has really helped me, in addition to A Course in Miracles, although I don't see it as separate from the Course, is the practice of mindfulness, with getting into the present moment, because the present moment is where that core sense of self, that peaceful, loving self, abides. It's in the present. So if I'm not in the present, I'm not going to connect with it, because I'm going to be thinking about past or future, which is what ego voice, anxiety voice, the fearful voice. So the practice of mindfulness has really helped me with getting into the present to hear that voice of love within myself. And I actually have a course called Mindfulness for Miracle Workers, where I bring together mindfulness meditation for course students, since many of us are studying the Course in Miracles pathway now. And so I will wake up and pause, and just, rather than, getting right out of bed and going on with my day, I will purposefully lay there in bed. I'll put my hands usually on my belly, sometimes maybe one hand on my chest, one hand on my belly, and I'll just breathe. I'll just sense my breath. Even if it's just for like 3 breaths, it doesn't have to be that long. It just helps me connect with getting grounded, with feeling, in the here and now. And throughout the day now, I talk to that capital S sense of self. I talk to love's voice within me. A Course in Miracles calls it Holy Spirit. That's just language that's specific to the course. You can use any, language like inner teacher or inner guide or intuition, whatever works for you. But I will constantly, whenever bumps show up in the road in whatever form they may be, I'm constantly turning to that part within me and saying, I'm willing to look at this differently. Because for me, it's a practice of not hanging on to my own perceptions. When I think I know, when I think I know the way things are, or when I judge that a situation is, a certain way, I'm sort of making it concrete and fixed. Whereas if I can stay in this more fluid place of ease, that I don't know anything, I can rise up above a situation to maybe see it more broadly, but I don't have a broad perspective of everything that's happening everywhere all at once. So for me, it's just helpful to recognize that I don't know what anything is for, and I can just sort of practice really non-judgment in all situations and circumstances. And if I notice that some triggers come up, maybe defensiveness or feeling agitated or stressed, whatever lack of peace shows up, my daily practice is to be connecting with that core sense of self, that higher mind, and asking to see it differently and asking to see the miracle. So that's that's a little bit of my daily practice. And what about you, Jody?
I do the same. I do one of the same practices. I kind of say, show me what this is. Like if I'm ever in a situation that doesn't make sense, our mind wants to make sense of stuff, and so when we get in situations all the time that don't make sense, that seem to be suffering or seem to be problematic. And so what I do is the same thing. It's just like, I don't know what this means, show me what it means. And then I kind of go on about my day, and I don't wait and be like, show me right now. And, I just say, show me what it means. I know it's going to unfold, whatever I need to know about it, but I'm letting go of making that meaning myself. Because when I make that meaning myself, I'm going to filter it through whatever fear is happening about whatever people suffering that I'm seeing or whatever. And then that could freeze me or get me really distracted. I mean, the ego is very distracting. That fear voice is really, it just is trying to get our attention. So if it says one thing and doesn't get our attention, it'll say something else and get our attention. It just wants our attention. And so if you say, I don't even know what this means, show me what it means. And if it's something about me, like if I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling bad, because I'm human. And so for me, it's about embracing the humanness and the spirit, right, inside me. And so allowing myself to be human. So if I'm human and I feel something like sadness or something, to embrace that and be like, well, show me who I am. I just asked a question, and the course taught me, like, you don't have to know anything. It's the best. You don't have to figure anything out. We suffer so much trying to figure stuff out. Blaming, because when things don't make sense to us, the fastest way to make sense of something is blame. Either we blame ourselves or blame the other person, but mostly we go back and forth and get real distracted by that blame game, trying to figure it out. And so if you circumvent that and just like, I have no idea what this means. And sometimes you get the answer, it just comes to you, or it just makes sense, or, because you ask a question and then you'll get an answer, and that's just so nice. It's really good. So yeah, I do that when there's trouble, but yeah, I do walk. I asked a question because someone asked me today in a podcast, but I do walking outside, and I do some guided imagery, like pulling light through me. It's a great practice. And it's just because it's a little bit of a routine, I pull light through me, but
I would just want to add too, one of the things that you just touched on that makes me come back to something that you wrote about in your book was that asking, what can I learn? What can I learn? And I'm saying that broadly, what can I learn from any situation? But you say in here something about like, what can I learn from this anxiety? Like, what can I learn right now? And that openness to learning rather than putting our own meaning on it. Instead of, I'm deciding how this looks, what can I learn? It's just a much more open,
it's like you're taking the power back from the situation, right?
Yeah.
It's like, practically, like if you could think about it in existential terms, but you could also think about it in really practical terms by saying, what can I learn from it? It's like you got the power now. You got 1, anxiety's got 0.
That's right.
Yeah, I think someone asked a question about medication. Do we use either of us? And I know the cramps. Danielle, thank you so much for being she put an article that you wrote about having PMS, and totally, yeah. I mean, it's all about hormones, right? I mean, it's so connected, absolutely.
It's on my article. I'm sorry, go on.
No, yeah, go. Yeah, it's she put the link in, so that's awesome.
Yeah, that was just an article about being present with menstrual cramps. So I'm glad that you, thank you, Danielle, for posting that. So going back to the question about medication, Fiona, bloody hormones. The first time I went through my anxiety episode when I was in college, I opted not to, only because I knew if I started it, I'd never want to stop it. I wanted to find my way. I wanted to know where relief came from. So I didn't want to take medication because then maybe I wouldn't exactly be sure where the relief came from. But I knew it for myself then. I'd be too afraid to stop it. My adult episode of anxiety, I needed some relief. And so I did rely temporarily on medication and felt no guilt. And I feel like medication can serve a purpose at times. When we're so blocked with fear, I needed it temporarily to get me through.
Yeah. I always weigh the risks and benefits of it, and when the risks are so high, the benefits outweigh them. And so I did it temporarily. It didn't affect me very well. So it just at one point in my life I tried, and I got worse, but yeah. And so I have no stigma against it. I appreciate it in a lot of ways. I think that it's just one tool. It's just one tool to use, and it's available, and it saves lives. But it's not the only thing. And I don't buy into, that there's a chemical imbalance. I think that's been proven enough times that that's not really the case. I mean, our hormones are constantly changing and shifting with everything we put in our mouth, and with every experience that we have, every feeling in our body, our hormones change and shift. So there is no balance, and everyone's at different ways all the time anyway. So that's just a total myth. But yeah, I just think it's a tool, and it's an important tool. And I think some people just feel so judged about it. And that makes me really sad, because when I took it, I said, yes. And I took it. And I just said, yes, this is for me. But if you take medicine and be like, I wish I didn't have to take this. I wish I wasn't so weak. I wish I didn't have this problem. I think we digest all that, and food too. Like when I work with a lot of people with eating disorders, and it's like, when you eat, you say, yes. They're eating with guilt, and then it digests that guilt. I mean,
I really resonate with that. Yeah, I really resonate with that.
Yeah, it's like, lift it up. Thank you so much. And you swallow it, and you take it, and you just if you have gratitude for it, it's going to totally shift the way it works, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Wow, this has been awesome. I'm so excited. Yay. Thank you again, Jody, for writing this beautiful, beautiful book. And yeah, I think we're at the top of our time together.
Yes, trust me. Trust
you
you.
Can
Like
heal.
it's like you. Trust you. Trust you. I mean, that's the biggest message of tonight. Like you could totally trust yourself. You can. I believe in you so much because I know that you've been through a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. And you made it. And if you made it, then you could totally trust yourself. And so that's going to change everything. Oh yeah, Danielle, thank you. I forgot about that. I have this poster that's called "You're Invited to Heal," and it's in that Dropbox link right there that Danielle just put up. And so it's a PDF. You could hang it up somewhere, and it's just a little poem I made, little verse about healing. So that's for everybody.
Oh yay! Thank you.
All right. Well, so nice. I hope everyone has a nice evening tonight.
Me too.
And
Love
you go
all.
in and just spend some time. I love that, breathing with your hand of your heart and one of your belly. And a lot of times in webinars, I do a little meditation, but you know, when we hang up, when you're alone, if you're alone in your room, you might have family all around, but maybe just take a moment. Whatever's going on around you, just bring that into it. But just put one hand on your heart, one on your stomach. I love that. Thank you so much, Corinne. And just take 3 breaths with everybody together. Like we're all going to do it together.
That's awesome. I love that.
Because we're connected. Like there's something that happened that had us all here at this time free to be on this webinar together. And that's pretty amazing. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. Awesome. And so when we hang up, we'll just have that little connecting moment.
Let's do that. So everybody will make that intention that when we hang up, we're gonna all just pause before we move on to what we're doing. Should we just do it now? Let's just do it now.
I didn't know if you had to go.
At your own pace, just in a comfortable breathing pace, just taking 3 mindful breaths in and out, sensing each breath. Yay.
Yay. Well,
thank you, Jody.
I love you all. Thank you so much, Corinne. I love you too. And Danielle, thank you so much. I love you too. And
thanks everybody
on.
for being here. Love you all.
All right. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.